Namco has created many classic games that have gone on to define the 80s, 90s, and arcade generation as a whole. Hits like Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, and Mappy are still very popular despite their age. And throughout the decades, these games have had an unrivaled hold on arcades, consoles, PCs, and even the mobile phone market. Well, if they didn't delist their freaking games every 5 seconds. But despite the company's size and rich history, I wanted to take a minute and talk about something literally no one on YouTube has covered. Well, at least on my corner of the internet. Back in the mid-2000s, in an era when AAA gaming only seemed to be getting bigger, better, more cinematic, and more story-driven, it's no surprise that Namco Bandai, of all companies, was at the forefront when it came to bringing back the arcade experience in a modern format. After all, it's their legacy, and Namco was no stranger to re-releasing their games on anything that could even render so much as a single pixel. I mean, come on, who doesn't love some good retro aesthetics? Too retro. But one thing Namco did time and time again was remake their classic games for the modern generation. Now, I'm not gonna name every remake, but for the sake of context, let's highlight a few notable ones that build up. As early as the mid-90s, we got Namco Classic Collection, which served as an updated remake for the current generation. We got Pac-Man arrangement, Galaga arrangement, Mappy arrangement, and quite a few other arrangement games. I'm actually going to be covering this in full detail in the future, so please stay tuned in a few months. In 2005, Namco Museum Battle Collection was released on the PSP, which housed new arrangements of Pac-Man, Galaga, Modos, and Dig Dug. Then in 2007, we got Namco Museum Remix, and later Mega Mix, which featured remakes of Modos, Galaga, Rally X, and Gator Panic. Finally, in 2010, the topic of today's video, we had the short-lived Namco Generations, which, you guessed it, contains remakes of Pac-Man, Galaga, and 2 other lesser-known games I'll show off later in the video. There was a lot I want to cover, so to keep things simple, we're going to cover Namco Generations in full. That includes who started it, what the purpose of it was, the games that were part of it, and what became of it afterward. To the handful of people that watch me, I'd like to say thank you for inspiring me to push through, and for any newcomers, feel free to subscribe, but only if you learned something today. If enough of you are interested, I'd love to do a deeper dive in the future. So with that, let's get into it. So the year was 2010. The chief producer of Namco Generations was led by the one and only Hideo Yoshizawa. If that name doesn't ring any bells, then let me jog your memory by reminding you he created Klonoa, Mr. Driller, and has been credited with some very generation-defining games like Ninja Gaiden, Ridge Racer Type 4, Pac-Pix, and my all-time favorite, Muscle March for the Nintendo Wii.
Ask yourself, am I the man that I thought I was gonna be? Well, maybe not.
Alongside him was Tadashi Iguchi, who was notable for being the director of Pac-Man Championship Edition, Championship Edition DX, then eventually Galaga Legions, Championship Edition 2, and many other games, with him being most recently credited as the lead planner on Pac-Man Shadow Labyrinth. There are many more people involved, but right now, both of these individuals, along with their teams, would set off to create something truly fun and unique because they had one goal in mind. So what was the goal of Namco Generations? On paper, the easy way to explain it was to create modern remakes of their classic titles. This doesn't sound too remarkable nowadays with the plethora of remakes and remasters that only exist to bait your nostalgia and drain your wallet. But this was different for a special reason. It's not only about games, but about forming a direct connection. If you owned a Xbox 360 or PS3, this direct connection came in the form of a newsletter that was accessible on Namco's now defunct website. Much like the Nintendo Directs of yesteryear led by Iwata, Namco Generations was made out of love for gamers who wanted the most out of their favorite games. Sure, you can brush a statement like that aside because a company's only goal is to profit by any means necessary, but as for the developers that worked with Namco when it was much more smaller and down to earth, this was made to bring back the healthy relationship between developer and consumer when direct feedback was a mere phone call or letter away.
Namco was a small company back when Pac-Man was first born. There was a healthy proximity between developer and consumer that allowed for direct impact between each party. Namco Generations was created in an attempt to bring those days back. This newsletter is just an example of providing players with a little more insight into the world of game development.
Either way, Yoshizawa knew good games are the result of feedback and the fans getting their opportunity to shine. By letting them have insight on game development and other areas of the company, everyone could be happy. Namco Generations spanned 18 volumes, 1 special, and was released periodically to the public, detailing the ups and downs of game development, how ideas were formed, refined, scrapped, and even some advice on how to play the games better. Overall, I'd say their goal was met in making the player feel special and involved with the process. Now, there is another cool bit about Namco Generations, but for the sake of pacing, I'll save it for later. Now, let's talk about... So now that we know what the goal of Namco Generations is, we gotta back this up with some games, of course. And that's where things take a weird turn. Officially, only 2 games were released under the Namco Generations name, with the third one being announced with a trailer and the fourth one seemingly being lost to time until some recent breakthroughs were made. First up is Pac-Man, who needs no introduction. His new game came in the form of Championship Edition. To keep it short and simple, the first CE game was supposed to be a modern reboot of Pac-Man which utilized brighter colors, more powerful technology, and widescreen support for the modern age, which was released in 2007. This also served as the last game Pac-Man's creator, Toru Iwatani, would develop. However, in late 2010, Championship Edition DX came out and completely revamped the formula, being faster, more refined, and polished, featuring the iconic ghost train that follows you and tons of new mazes. It was a bold move to take the gameplay to this extreme, but in the end, it paid off.
We really wanted to keep true to our values of Pac-Man. The greatest obstacle might have been making sure we didn't deviate or make excuses for ourselves. We're not sure if it's a direct result, but we're incredibly happy to hear fans tell us that Pac-Man Championship Edition DX was Pac-Man 2. Hideki Tanami, art director.
This game became the first under the Namco Generations lineup and proved to the world that the Pac was in fact still back. If you want more information on these games, check out my past videos on it where I break down the entire series here. Next in the lineup was Galaga, the sequel to the beloved Galaxian space shooter. Shoot the alien swarms, power up your ship, and save the galaxy with this classic space shooter. Similar to Pac-Man CE and then CE DX, Galaga got the spotlight in the form of Galaga Legions, an all-new title in 2008 to celebrate the 30th anniversary, which took the core of the series and turned it into a fast-paced technical shmup. Yeah, this is Galaga now. Feel old yet? However, while the first game was praised for being a technical beauty and brimming with fast-paced action, it was also pretty difficult for most casual fans. And shortly before the sequel came out, the director, Tadashi Iguchi, had an interview to answer questions about it.
The main concept is to make an exhilarating title that can be experienced by everyone. In the previous installment, we pushed too hard for originality and created something that was a bit more niche. We're striving for simpler controls so that all players can focus more on the frantic gameplay.
I have to admit, I respect the man's humility. He could have blamed the players for not getting it, but instead, he acknowledged the mistakes and set out to make a better game with his team. A short while later, the sequel, Galaga Legions DX, came out, which improved upon many of the previous game's main critiques. All I can say is that if you're a fan of shmups and have access to a modded Xbox or PS3, then please by any legal means play this game. I'll do a dedicated review on this bad boy later, but if you do go out to play these games, hear me out real quick with this quick comparison. The first game, Galaga Legions, is more akin to an old school arcade game and is much harder. The gameplay relies on you placing your satellites around the screen to take out waves of enemies, but unless you like trial and error, the game is quite brutal as the later stages really ask you to beat them in a specific way, and being grazed by anything will kill you instantly. The sequel that came out very shortly after that, though, was Galaga Legions DX. This one fixes many of those problems by adding the slowdown when you get near danger, similar to Pac-Man, and instead of placing your satellites on the screen, you can now freely move them in 2 formations in any direction with the right analog stick to completely wreck the Galaga as you push your ship to its absolute limits. While DX sold significantly less, it garnered a lot more praise and became the second game to live under the Namco Generations name. The game is flashy, beautiful, and has an amazing soundtrack. It's fast-paced, insane, and like the trailer says, it's super psychotic, destructive ecstasy. Opinions that'll get you like this?
Yep.
Next is a slightly more obscure game, which is Metro Cross. I say slightly because if you're always online, this is a no-brainer, but if you ask the general public, you're probably getting jumped. The point of the original game was to basically run down the course while avoiding obstacles, traps, and all sorts of junk in your way while making a frantic dash to the goal in a set amount of time. It's actually quite addicting, and there's a real thrill in optimizing how well you play to make it to the goal in time. Well, addictive, I love this.
He's throwing it back.
No! This game was supposed to get the same treatment as Pac-Man and Galaga by getting a full-blown next-gen remake, and we have evidence of this because Namco at the time released a trailer for the game. But for some mysterious reason, the game got canned at the literal last second, with them giving no explanation. From what we can see though, Aero Cross was gonna have a much more realistic, futuristic setting while building upon the game's core mechanics. The only evidence of this game existing in some fashion is via gaming magazine reports in the past, and the Wayback Machine capturing the announcement that Aero Cross was being removed and cancelled. But it's funny how things work out, because in 2016 on assemblergames.org, this user managed to come across a seemingly full build of the game with a build date from November of 2010. So yes, that means the third Namco Generations game is playable so long as you have an emulator or modded console. Now after playing through the game myself, it's extremely disappointing how this managed to get canned. The controls feel great and the core mechanics and new additions are just enough to keep that arcade competitive edge without feeling bloated. You can tell a lot of work went into this, so all I can say is please check this one out. No, no, no!
Dang.
I think that's enough footage. The last game in the Namco Generations line is probably one of the weirdest games I've seen the company make, and the fact that they had the balls to even remake such a game is actually pretty funny. Dancing Eyes, the 1996 arcade game, was only released in Japan and features a robust and varied style of gameplay. Similar to the arcade game Kicks or Amadar, you play as Yurusu, a monkey whose goal is to remove all the tiles on the playing field. However, those tiles usually consist of women's clothing, and after you complete a square, or multiple ones, they break off and reveal, well, yeah. There are enemies to avoid and power-ups to collect, but the main goal is to clear all the tiles to advance to the next stage. After you beat the stage, you even get a moment to examine your hard work via a Showtime mode where you can zoom in and out to your heart's content. Oh, meow. And for those of you not interested in women, fear not, because Namco has got you covered with muscular men and a cow. I also have to admit the 3D models for the characters are really good looking and pretty detailed for 1996, even if they are a little goofy looking. I managed to find an article where the developers had a discussion about the game, and they all had a ton of fun going on to explain that they even managed to get some pretty high-profile voice actresses, like Michie Tomizawa, who's known for her work as Sailor Mars. There are 41 characters and 2 unique songs per character, leading to a total of 82 tracks, and so many cool details, I'll honestly have to save them for another day. Was this made for the sex appeal and male gaze? Yeah, but I ain't complaining. So, as for the modern remake, I couldn't get a whole lot of info about the game or its development, and to be honest, I'm not here to do a deep dive. The important thing to note is that Namco made an announcement that Dancing Eyes was on the list of games to be released under the Namco Generations lineup, but this title in particular was a PS3 exclusive as it would feature support for the PlayStation Move. All this information came in the way of mainstream gaming news and articles with very little outside of that though. However, they simply made a statement that the game was cancelled, apologizing for it, and the rest was history. But we did at least get a very unique trailer for the game that was released before Namco privated the video. Now that's where the story would have ended, but thankfully while doing some research, I came across a time extension article that reported the long lost game was actually recovered. The user AntView found the unreleased remake on a broken PS3 dev kit from a French collector, and after it was fixed, the game was dumped. Now, I have yet to play this one personally, but if you have a modded PS3 or emulator, it's entirely possible to get this up and running. Just be sure to follow their guide. The remake itself, and no, I'm not talking about the women, is actually really good looking for a game from 2011. The music is pretty nice, and the UI and font choice is pretty unique, giving it a pinch of that Y2K style we all know and love. I hate it when women are like, my eyes are up here, but ma'am, the greatest arcade game is on your chest right now. It's Mappy. As for the actual gameplay, it's just like the original. But just like any game getting the Generations treatment, there is a much heavier emphasis on the combos, but you're still free to play the stages in any way you choose. Whoa, hey, officer, I can explain! Also, after beating the stage, instead of going straight into showtime, you get a cool little mini-game where you get to poke the rest of the enemies off, then you can move on to the next stage. Subject matter aside, it's a well-made game, and it's a shame that it got canned. But thanks to the dedicated efforts of Anview and many others, we can still experience these games that the developers worked so hard on. Now, I didn't know where to fit this in the video, but I thought it would be cool to point out that Namco did their homework when creating Namco Generations. You see, when you're a company with a rich history, there's a lot to pull from, and I want you to pay special attention to the NG logo that Namco has been using in the game so far. You see, it actually originates from an old gaming magazine that they used to run in the 80s and 90s that would cover all sorts of cool Namco related stuff. Honestly, this series of magazines is worthy of a video itself if I could get a proper translator, but for the time being, I want you to look at this. Starting in 1989 with the 28th issue, the NG logo got an update. And if it's not obvious by now, you can clearly see the NG logo is clearly from their old magazines, which is a fantastic callback. Stuff like this really makes me respect the company's history. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and unless I've missed anything during my hours of research, these are the only Namco Generations games that have ever existed, and there's no announcements of any others that were ever planned to be made. It's funny how even though we've lost in a way, we still technically won in the end, with at least 2 of the last games being found, dumped and preserved online for the rest of the world to play. I'm super happy to have finally talked about this niche little topic, and I really hope you all get the chance to play these games for yourselves. But ultimately, I hope you were able to learn and take something away from today's video. To end things off, I'd like to say thank you all for watching to the very end of this video. It's very hard to make stuff nowadays with me working a full-time job and whatnot. But to those that actually watch my videos to the end, or even are interested in what I do, it really means a lot to me, especially to everyone that supports me on Ko-fi. So, with that I'll say, this is Tay heading out. Thank you all for watching, and remember, stay foxy. The music is pretty nice, and the UI and font choice is pretty unique, giving it a pinch of that UK2... UK2? No, Y2K, oh my god. As for the actual gameplay, it's just like the original, but just... I'm gonna reread the whole thing actually.